With early voting in full swing, you might be wondering who's on the ballot here in Denton. This past weekend, I interviewed all 3 Denton mayoral candidates for our series called Making the Mayors. These exclusive interviews give you an insight into each of these candidates' stories and why they are running for office. Incumbent Mayor Gerard Hudspeth kicks off our series. My first question for you is, you have been the leader of over 100,000 Denton residents for a little over 4 years. How do you represent the diversity of the Denton community through your work as mayor?
For me, the important part is being out and about and attending events, going to schools, so I go to the elementary schools, high schools, those sort of things, because that's where I get the most feedback, stay the most plugged in. Those that are going to send you emails are going to send emails, right? But then there's those that may be hesitant to reach out or have some input and they don't think it's important enough, or time gets away from them, they're busy, that sort of thing. So being out and about and hearing those comments, concerns directly.
Yeah, and that's really important, especially since, you're leading so many people. You want to be as close to them as possible. Yeah. So you have been reelected more than once, considering what you've done here in Denton as a city council member and as mayor. What keeps the Denton people coming back to you?
I believe, from what I've heard, it's about the authenticity. People will say, I like that you're authentic and you're open. And if I'm frustrated, the former city manager and I had a joke, because I went to him and I said, man, I got to work on my poker face. He's like, you don't have one. But that's, people have complimented me on that. And that's still no excuse, right? You still have to be better, get better, hone your craft, all those things. But just, if something's bothering me, I'll tell you it's bothering me, and we'll work through it. And you got to have thick skin. I mean, it is hard. It's a hard job. Expectations are high. There's a lot of challenges that come with it.
My last question for you, and I'm going to be asking this to all of the candidates: what makes a good Denton mayor?
I think a good Denton mayor is someone that's comfortable in their own skin decisions. As a leader, you have to, almost like an umpire, right? You got to call balls and strikes. So just speaking specifically from experience, from kind of a mayor's perspective, and having done that, I think that's really the thing, is you have to be comfortable making decisions that may be hard, but in the best interest of the majority of the city. So you're talking 151,000 people. What's the majority of that, and how do you represent them well? Understanding if it's a 51 to 49 split, it's really close, but you have to explain that 49%, the sentiment of the majority, and that's why you went forward. But that's a hard conversation to have, because you have a large number of people that may disagree, but the majority did agree, so you move forward that way.
You can see the next 2 mayoral candidate interviews tomorrow and Thursday. Just like Mr. Hudspeth, each of these candidates have unique backgrounds and perspectives to bring to the Denton community. So if you're a Denton County voter, don't miss out on the opportunity to meet the person behind the name on the ballot. Grace, back to you.
Thanks, Chris. Are you registered to vote in the local Denton election? If so, you might be wondering who your candidates really are. This past weekend, NTTV's Avery Callens interviewed all 3 Denton mayoral candidates for our series called Making the Mayors. These exclusive interviews give an insight into each of these candidates' stories and why they are running for the office. We kicked off the series last night with incumbent Mayor Gerard Hudspeth, and tonight we bring you candidate Lucas Wedgeworth.
You have lived in Denton for 20 years. You have studied here. You've taught here. At what point did you decide you wanted to become mayor?
It was based on a conversation I had with my students. It was just before Thanksgiving, and we were talking about, kind of just casually, a civics topic of various titles a person could have. So it started off as king, queen, knight, dame, duchess, duke. And one of the things they said to me was like, well, we should see how someone's supposed to run for something like mayor. And they told me, like, you should run for mayor. And I thought that, I should walk through this path and see how far it goes.
Yes, yes. You also said you had in mind some practical steps that we could start taking in order to implement, some more housing development. What would those steps look like?
So I'd be working with developers who value that vision, because right now the value that we're seeing around town is gigantic subdivisions that people can't afford, gigantic shopping malls filled with major box stores, and I think Denton needs a vision of smaller and closer to home.
My last question for you that I'm asking all of the mayoral candidates is, what do you think makes a good Denton mayor?
Compassion. I think the only way you can lead is understanding what your people are going through and responding in empathetic ways that support them.
You can catch the last mayoral candidate interview tomorrow and find Gerard Hudspeth's interview on NCTV Live YouTube archive. Just like Mr. Wedgeworth, each of these candidates have unique backgrounds and perspectives to bring to the Denton community. So if you're a Denton County voter, don't miss out on the opportunity to meet the person behind the name on the ballot.
But there is also big political events on the local level. Here in Denton, the office of mayor is on the line in the March 5th elections. NTTV's Avery Callens interviewed all 3 Denton mayoral candidates on the ballot in this series, Making the Mayor. These exclusive interviews give an insight into each of these candidates' stories and why they're running for office. Callens asked our last mayoral candidate, Stephen P. Dillenberg, what makes a good Denton mayor?
I think somebody who cares, somebody who will look at someone in the eyes and say, how are you today? And if they say, I need this, you will legitimately consider whatever it is without any consideration of what that does to your personal financial statements. If you can't do that, I think you're disqualified.
Dillenberg also promised action on some issues that might lie outside of traditional mayoral duties.
So that's my guarantee, like we talked about. If I don't get cancer cured by the time the students are back here, if 25% of students will stay in town through May the 4th, then that's enough to get me elected.
You can catch all the candidates' interviews on NTTV's YouTube archive. Each of these candidates have unique backgrounds and perspectives to bring to the Denton community. So check out the person behind the name on the ballot.